Continue now at the top of Daf Tezvav at Aleph from Meseches Rosh Hashana. This is Rosh Hashana Daf 15a. The Gemara now explains its question on Rabba bar Rav Huna from the Tosefta. The Gemara says, Man shamat le da'azal basar lakita. Who's the man da'amar that follows lakita, that follows the time when you pick the fruit when it comes to esrog? Rabbi Gamliel, that Tana is Rabbi Gamliel, as Rashi over here says. Alma Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Gamliel Svirla. You see that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar in the Tosefta that we just quoted on the previous Amud is following Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. V'katani Shvat, and yet what does it say in the Tosefta? It says that the Rosh Hashanah is Shvat, and not like Rabbi bar Rav Huna said. He said by Esrog, if you follow Rabbi Gamliel, then Rosh Hashanah is going to be Tishrei, because again, the Esrog is considered like a Yerek in that regard. And so the Gemara says, you're right, Ela Itmar Hachi Itmar. Rather, if Rabbi bar Rav Huna said something, this is what he said. The Gemara presents the alternative, Rabbi bar Rav Huna, Amar Rabbi bar Rav Huna. Rabbi bar Rav Huna says, Afal Gav di Amar Rabbi Gamliel. Even though Rabbi Gamliel said that Esrog Achar Lekita Ki Yerek, that Esrog, we follow the time you pick it, just like a Yerek, just like a vegetable, but still, Rosh Hashanah Shalosh Shavat, but still the Rosh Hashanah is going to be Shvat, and it's not going to be Tishrei, and again, that would be consistent with the Tosefta above. And the Gemara continues, Ma'ishna Hasam, what's the difference over there when we were talking about vegetables? The Kataniim Hoisa Shnia Nechneses L'Shlishis. There they give a case where it's the second year going into the third year. U'Ma'ishna Hachan, what's the difference over here? The Katani, by Esrog it says, and Hoisa Shlishis Nechneses L'Revius, that it's the third year going into the fourth year. Why give different cases? It's exactly the same basic halacha. And to that, the Gemara answers, Milsa Agavurchi Kamashmalan. In this case, by Esrog, we're teaching us something along the way. The Esrog Kasha Le'yoda, because by Esrog, when it comes to an Esrog tree, when people touch it a lot, it is bad for the tree. And since during the Shemitah year, when the trees are ownerless, so then everyone's touching the trees, so therefore people handle this Esrog tree. So Lotoin Priyatalos Shanin, so it doesn't produce fruit until 3 years, and that's why the case we give in the Tosefta is specifically the third year going into the fourth year, because the second year of the Shemitah cycle there's not going to be any fruit anyway, because the tree was damaged from being handled during the Shemitah year. The Gemara continues, Boy Minei Rabbi Yochanan me Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yochanan asked Rabbi Yanai the following question, Esrog Rosh Hashanah Shalo Emasai. When is the Rosh Hashanah for the Esrog tree? So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, Shvat, the Rosh Hashanah is going to be in Shvat. So he asked, Shvat Chadashim, is that Shvat of the lunar calendar? Oh, Shvat Tkufa, is that Shvat Tkufa, which means the Shvat of the solar calendar, which comes 30 days after the winter solstice. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, the Chadashim, we're talking about Shvat of the lunar calendar. And the Gemara continues, Boy Minei Rav Rav Nachman, Rav asked Rav Nachman the following question, V'amri lo Rav Yochanan me Rav Yanai. Some people say it was Rav Yochanan that asked Rav Yanai the following question, Haisa Shanu Uberis Ma, what if it's a leap year? When is the Rosh Hashanah for Ilanos on a leap year? So Amar Lei said to him, Halach Achar Rov Shanim, you follow the majority of years, and the Rosh Hashanah is still going to be in Shavat. Gemara continues, Amar Rabba says, Esrog bas shishis shenichnaso l'shvius. Let's say you have an Esrog that grew in the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, but it was only picked in the 7th year of the Shemitah cycle. So Petura min ha-meiser, it's going to be Pater from Meiser, Upetura min ha-biur. It's also Pater from Biur. Biur is a mitzvah by produce of the Shemitah year. You have to eliminate that produce from your house when it's no longer available in the field. And Rashi will explain the reason for all these halachas. Ubas shvius shenichnaso l'shminis. And let's say you have a situation where the Esrog grew in the 7th year and it was picked in the 8th year. So there the halach is Petura b'meiser v'chayeves b'biur. Halach is it's Pater from Meiser and it's chayev in biur. So Amar le Abaya, so Abaya said to Rabbi, I don't understand. B'shalom maseifa l'chumra. I understand that your last ruling, so you're always being strict. El Reisha, but in the first case, Petura min ha-biur, you're saying it's Pater from the mitzvah of biur. Amai, so what's the reason why you're saying Pater? De'amrin on zil basar chanata. Apparently you're saying you follow the year that it grew. So in that first case, it grew in the 6th year, so it's Pater from biur. But if you're following the chanata, so yachi, if so, to chayev in meiser, so it should be chayev in meiser as well, because it should be considered a 6th year fruit and not a 7th year fruit. So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, Yad hakol memashmashin ba. Everybody's touching it. This entire field is ownerless. V'yat amrit to chayev in meiser, and you're saying it should be chayev in meiser. No, the reason why it's Pater from meiser is essentially it's considered hefker. And Rashi over here explains, Amar le Abaya, Abaya said to Rabba, Bishlam Asef, I understand your last ruling. The Ko'amrit bas shviyas shenichnas l'shminis, because you said if it grew in the 7th year and was picked in the 8th year, Peturim and meiser, so you said it's Pater from meiser. Al monaga book kedusha shviyas, you see that it's considered to have the kedusha shviyas. It's considered 7th year. Umechayev lafkur, and you have to make it hefker. The hefkera Peturim and meiser, and the general halach is that hefker is Pater from meiser. The mashma the azlas ba basar chanata, and it sounds like you're following the year that it grew. Le'inyan hefker shviyas, in terms of the halach of hefker shviyas. Well, in biur nami, and also when it comes to the halacha, the mitzvah of biur, like you said, chayavin bebiur, you're chayav in biur. That I understand. Kol hach seifa, that entire seifa makes sense. Effectively, you're following the year it grew. You're following the 7th year. Now, avagav the sasra la reisha. Now, even though it seems to contradict the reisha, your first ruling, the ka'amr, because what did you say in the reisha? You said bas shishis shenichnas l'shvius. You said if it grew in the 6th year and it was picked in the 7th year, piturim and amaiser. You said it's pater from meiser. To hefker mishum shvius. Apparently, there you're also considering it hefker because of the shemitah year. Alma basar lakita has lisba le'inyan shvius. So now you see that you're following the year that it was picked in terms of the halachas of shvius. The lav the shvius naga ba, because if not for the fact of shemitah, lo have a miftera, wouldn't be pater from meiser. Defkeira de shvius pater lo meiser. The reason why it's pater from meiser is because of the hefker of shvius. Kidatanya v'mechilta, like it says in the mechilta. V'achlu evyonei amecha v'yisram tochal chayas hasada machayo chelas u'petura min ha-meiser af adam pater. In other words, if something is hefker, it's pater from meiser. But he said in terms of that contradiction, halo havakashali, that wouldn't have bothered me. Because I would have said, okay, you have a doubt over here. When it comes to the halachas of Shemitah, you're not sure by Esrog, do you follow the year that it grew? Or basar lekita, or do you follow the year that it was collected? Kemo b'maiser, just like by maiser. So I would have just assumed you're always being machmir, sveika do raisa l'chumra. However, the problem is as follows. But in that first ruling, the sayam to ba peturim and abiur, because over there you also said that you're pater from biur, you're pater from the mitzvah of eliminating the produce to kuluhu. That's actually a leniency, so that doesn't make sense. Amai damrinon zil basar chanot. Apparently over there you're following the year that it grew. Ashmat lon ba delom misafkalach, and it seems like now you don't have any doubt. You're for sure following the chanata. Umaskana dereisha v'kula seifa chad taimahu. The pshita lach the basar chanata is linan. It sounds like the maskana of the Reisha and the entire Sefer, it's all the same, meaning the last thing you said in the Reisha and the entire Sefer, you're saying you always follow the year it grows. But if that's the case, if you're following Chanata, the Lo Mesafkin, there's no doubt, and we're saying that if it grew in the 6th year, there is no halachas of Shemitah, so then the question remains, it's chayiv in Meiser. It should be chayiv in Meiser in that first case. The lav hefker, because it's not hefker. So that was the question. In other words, it seems from your rulings that you're following Chanata. That's what Abaye said to Rabbah. And if you're following Chanata, so then it doesn't make any sense in that first case when it grew in the 6th year. So it should be chayiv in Meiser, not pater from Meiser. And Rabbah answered, Yad hakol memashmishim ba nihidelo mechayiv lafkura. What Rabbah was saying was as follows. I understand that really it grew in the 6th year and you're not chayiv to make it hefker. It's considered a 6th year fruit. The lo noag ba shvius. We don't treat it like a 7th year fruit. Miu, nevertheless, kol sados upardesos hefker in b'shvius. In general, all fields are pater and all orchards are hefker, not pater. They're all hefker during the Shemitah year. Ve'ein esrog zen nishmer balavado. So this one particular esrog, which happened to grow in the 6th year, was picked in the 7th year, so that wasn't protected. Obviously, everyone's going to go in there. Everyone's touching everything. The hefker pater min ha-meiser, so al karchach, it's going to be hefker, and it's pater from meiser. So in other words, what he was saying was, Rabbah is saying that yes, really we do follow chanata, we follow the year that it grew, but when it comes to the halachas of hefker, once the field is hefker, it doesn't really matter when it grew, it's going to be pater from meiser. And the Gemara continues, Rav Hamnuna Amar, and Rav Hamnuna says, Bas shishis shenichneses l'shvius, if it grew in the 6th year and it was picked in the 7th year, li olam shishis, you always treat it like a 6th year. Ubas shvius hanichneses l'shminis, and if it grew in the 7th year and was picked in the 8th year, liolam shvius, you always treat it like a 7th year. And Rashi over here explains, Rav Hamnuna Amar liolam shishis v'chayev b'meiser. In this case, it's considered a 6th year and it's chayev in meiser. The kevon de shvius lo nohaga ba, since it's not considered a shemitah year fruit, v'lav hefkera de malki, it wasn't made hefker by the Torah. Mishmush yad hakol sheba eino ala gezel. The fact that everybody is touching it, the fact that the fields are hefker, but that's still considered gezel. They're just stealing this particular fruit. This particular fruit is not a shemitah fruit. Vein hefker kazeh peturim min ha-meiser. According to Rav Hamnuna, when you have hefker in this kind of situation, it's not going to be pater from meiser. And the Gemara continues. Meisvei, we have a question from the following brayso. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Esrog bas shisha shenichneses l'shvius. If you have an esrog that grew in the 6th year and it was picked in the 7th year, peturim min ha-meiser or peturim min ha-biur. It's going to be pater from meiser, and it's also going to be pater from biur. She'ein loch dover shechayiv in meiser, because you never have a situation where something is chayiv in meiser. Elim kein gadol b'chiyav v'nilkat b'chiyav, unless it grew in chiyav and it was picked in chiyav. And again, in this particular case, the esrog was picked in the 7th year, that's a year where it's pater from Meiser. Ubas Shaviyah shenichneses l'shminis, and the Brisa continues. If it grew in the 7th year and was picked in the 8th year, Petura min ha-Meiser, it's going to be pater from Meiser. Upetura min ha-Biur, and in this case also it's going to be pater from Biur. She'ein loch davar shechayev bebiur, because something is not chayev in Biur. El imkein gadol b'shviyas v'nilkat b'shviyas, unless it grew in the 7th year and it was picked in the 7th year. And so the Gemara says, Reisha kasha l'Rav Hamnuna. The Reisha is a question against Rav Hamnuna. And Seifa kasha bein l'Rabba, bein l'Rav Hamnuna. The Seifa is going to be difficult whether you follow Rabba or whether you follow Rav Hamnuna. And Rashi explains, Meisvei Rav Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Hachi Garsina la b'Tosefta. Here's the proper text in the Tosefta. She'ein loch shechai b'Meiser, elam ken gadol b'Chiyav v'nilkat b'Chiyav. Number one, it's not chayiv in Meiser unless it grew in Chiyav and it was picked in Chiyav. With a Seifa Garsina, in the end we say, She'ein loch shechai b'Biur. It's not chayiv in Biur in terms of the halachas of Shemitah. Elam ken gadol b'Shviyas v'nilkat b'Shviyas, unless it grew in Shviyas and it was picked in Shviyas. And Rashi explains, first, they explain why is it pater from Meiser in this case, where it was picked in the 7th year. Why is it pater from Meiser? Because by most trees, we follow the year that it grew. Here it was the 6th year. It should be chayiv in Meiser. That's why we have to give a reason. The Ashmi'in and Karabin, what the Reisha of the Tosefta is actually saying is exactly like Rabbah. That's why the Reisha is a question on Rav Hamnuna. The Afa Gavdalav Hefker de Malku, even though it's not really technically Hefker because it's a 6th year fruit. Kavan de Sof Yadakol Mimash Mishinba, since at the end of the day everyone's touching it, the field is Hefker, Peturim and Amaiser, it's pater from Meiser. The Lepetura de Biur lo itzrich lemichtav time. And now in terms of the reason why it's pater from Biur, that we don't even need to explain, because again it grew in the 6th year, of course it's pater from Biur. The lo afke midin shari lonis, that's like every other tree. That's linan ba, basar chanat, we follow the year that it grew. You have time de beer. Now, in the end, there we have to give a reason why it's pater from beer, because in that case it grew in the 7th year. The leptura de meiser ashminan taima, the lo chayvu chachamim meiser. Obviously, in terms of meiser, it's going to be pater. We know the reason because we already said that the chachamim say that it's not chayv in meiser. Elam ken gadol b'chiyav and ilka b'chiyav, unless it grew in chiyav and was picked in chiyav. V'zel lo gadol b'chiyav, and certainly in the seifa it didn't grow b'chiyav because it grew in the 7th year. Elim ken gadol b'shviyas v'nilka b'shviyas, and again, this was talking about for biur. It's got to grow and it's got to be picked in the Shemitah year. Dechik siv levehem tucha v'lachaya shebar tzecha ti'alfin and mina biur, the pasuk which teaches us the halacha biur b'shviyas ksiv v'lo b'shminis. It's talking about the 7th year, not the 8th year. It's got to be fully grown and picked in the 7th year. And so that's what Rashi explains. Seifa kasha bein l'Rabba bein l'Rav Hamnuna. The Seifa is actually a question on both Rava and Rav Hamnuna. Because everybody really agrees that we follow the year it grew when it comes to Shviyas. Both Rab and Rav Hamnuna agree that if it grew in the 7th year, even though it was picked in the 8th year, it's going to be chayiv in biur. Like we said before, Rav Hamnuna only argued on Rab in a situation where it grew in the 6th year and then it was picked in the 7th year. There was a machlokas in terms of meiser because the fields are hefker. But in the case where it grew in the 7th year, was picked in the 8th year, there was no machlokas, and this Tosefta seems to go against both Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna. And the Gemara answers, Tanoi, it's actually a machlokas Tanoim, as Rashi over here says, Tanoi, haitana poligalayu, you're correct, the Tosefta argues on Rabbah and Rav Hamnuna, the Tana Achrina koi kavasai, but there's another Tana that follows their opinion, the Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa. Amar Rav Yossi says, Avtulmas heyed mishum chamisha zekenim, Avtulmas testified in the name of the 5 elders, Esrog achar lekitasu lemeiser. When it comes to esrog, in terms of the halachas of meiser of determining which year it is, we follow the year it's picked. V'raboseinu nimnu b'usha v'yamru. And the sages, they took a vote in Usha, and they said, achar lekitasu, you follow the year it's picked, bein lemeiser, bein l'shviyas. Whether you're talking about meiser, whether you're talking about shviyas. Now, shviyas was our issue. And so the Gemara says, shviyas man dekar shmei. Whoever mentioned shviyas, why does it suddenly say in this brisa, bein lemeiser, bein l'shviyas? Rabbi Yossi never mentioned anything about shviyas. As Rashi over here says, Shviyas man dekar shmei, dekamar deimnu alor raboseinu, alma ika man depolik. So you see that Shviyas also is subject to a machlokas in this regard, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tezvav Amud Beis.